Hey, today I'm going to go over some techniques for creating a logo for new media, and I'll show you an example of how it can be implemented, whether on a website or even as a partly transparent logo on top of video streaming like you see on, say, Hulu, which has, the USA Network, might have a logo in the lower right-hand corner while you watch the video, or also as part of a primary website. Of course, you're going to have logos on pretty much most major corporations, and very even small businesses have logos and identities as well. A couple things to consider. For this example, it's just going to be a hypothetical company called New Media Publishing. And there's two ways you can make logos. You can make a logo with the name in it, or you can make a logo just made of shapes, and the average person just knows that that logo is identified with that company. In this exercise, we'll actually create three, just one with only the name, and then one with shapes, and then one with both the name and the shape, and just some considerations to take into account when you're designing these three. First tool you want to use, obviously, the type tool. Okay, if you press T, go ahead and open up Adobe Illustrator, just go to File, New, and for this you can just hit OK. The letter size is fine for this example. And with Adobe Illustrator, if you click and drag with the type tool, start typing in text, and then use a selection tool and move it around, you'll notice I'm just moving the text box. It's not actually resizing it. In order to resize it, I'll have to select it and then change the font size up here manually. Now, another way to resize it might be a little bit easier is if instead of clicking and dragging, just click once and let go. And I'm just going to write in here, New River. And you notice when I get the selection tool, click and drag the corner, and that can distort, so hold shift to maintain the correct proportion. And it will resize like that to a specific size there just by resizing it manually. And some people like that a little bit better. So we have text here, of course, and it's still editable. I can go in and type and add more text. One thing to consider, though, is you may want to actually outline the text. It makes it a little bit more editable. What happens when you outline text is it creates anchor points and paths in between all these. It doesn't allow you to still edit the text as far as typing on it, but it does make it a little bit more editable as far as design goes. So you may want to just actually right-click over that and go to Create Outlines, and you'll notice it's now outlines. You can see those anchor points and paths in between. See the anchor point there, and there, there, and then the paths in between. If you use the white arrow, which is the direct selection tool, what you can do is actually click just on an anchor point and move it out, and hold shift. You want to maintain that 45 or 90 degree angle, and you can pull that out like that. You'll see a couple logos do that, where they take text and they edit the text so it is a little bit different. Okay, and you don't have to do that specifically for this one, but it does help sometimes if you're going for a unique look. And of course, besides just moving the paths like this, and also the points, you can also click and hold onto the pen tool, and you can add anchor points as well. So if I wanted to add an anchor point, say right here, so I could pull that specific anchor point out, I could do that as well. And then click and hold, you can also delete anchor points. That's if you click and hold onto the pen tool, that's available there. So for this example, I'm just going to leave that for now. But if you want to make something a little bit more memorable, this is just plain text. So the first thing you could do perhaps is maybe move these things a little bit closer to each other. So if you, for example, use the white arrow, the direct selection, you can click inside each of these and move them a little bit closer to each other. So I'll do that really quick. Make sure you don't grab the edge, because then that will just move the edge instead of moving the entire letter there. I've left a little bit of space in between here, and I'm just brainstorming here, but you can think about when you're creating a logo, let's make something a little bit more memorable. I think maybe a river coming through in the middle there once we do the shape one. But for the one with just text, I think maybe put these a little bit closer actually. And to separate these apart, one effective way of doing this is actually making this different color. So I have the fill color there on the top. I'm just going to pick a blue. And if you're not sure how much, if you want to do that again, click here and then click there. You're not going to choose the same exact one. So what you can do is choose the magnifying glass. The eyedropper tool, and whatever you have selected, you press the eyedropper tool and it will pull those attributes of wherever you point. So I'm going to make sure those are all the same. For these 5, I'll actually just click and drag around them all with the direct selection tool. And I'm just going to have maybe a little bit darker kind of analogous color there with it. So already we have the beginnings of a logo. Oops. Actually, that looks kind of cool, but I'm going to want to click inside each of these with the direct selection tool, hold shift, and then I'll hold shift and it'll bring it a little bit closer over. And just for the text one. And so to make this a little bit more creative, we just have to think about, but without using shapes yet, just have to think about how we could add to this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think for this one, is just do a simple, we're bringing this down just slightly. Oops, that shouldn't be there. I think I'll get rid of that anchor point. Oops. Okay. So for this one, this is just an example, but you could, if you wanted to make this a little bit thicker on the edge there, and I'm going to hold shift to maintain that correct one. And with anywhere where I have the edge here, you can make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to actually let that overlap. And this one just slightly. Actually, that one's a little bit too big on the edge there. This one could come over, almost like, think about the CNN logo, how it overlaps a little bit. And with the new river, we'll have it overlap just slightly. Need a little bit of space there for the E, so what I'll have to do is I'll have to zoom in and click right here. Just bring it in like that. Actually bring this one in just slightly. Same idea here, have it overlap. And that's one option. If you don't like, trying to jumble them up too much together, you could, think about something else as far as making the text unique. So if you can make it a little bit more subtle as well. So for this one, I'll bring this out like that. And I'm going to outline these again. And what I can do, zoom in. And I'm actually going to select all of these, put them a little bit closer. Not so much, whoops, not so much like the last one where they're really close. Just slightly. I'll do this one too. And these two, make a little bit closer. And instead of just being right next to each other, you could actually move this. Oops. Make sure I have it all selected here. And you could do something like, instead of being right next to each other, you can have it like that. And you'll notice you kind of have a flow right there. Maybe even make it overlap slightly. If I just select these two. Okay, it's a little bit off right here though, so you'd want to actually bring those two, maybe even bring that over so it would both connect as well, and you could kind of get a look going there as well. So you could actually zoom in, and I'd have to pull this over like that, see how it's kind of editable. This middle one though, anchor point, I could probably get rid of, but actually, yeah. There we go. So you need to line this up. You could even connect them, but I'm just going to do it by eye right there. And then this bottom part you'd want to bring over just slightly. And also don't need this anchor point. Okay. And right at the meeting area right here, just need to bring this slightly over. And that's one kind of option, especially if you were trying to look at the kind of nature aspect of it, because it is called river. Of course, you could change the color of all this, especially let's say if you just wanted these to be a specific color, and then you wanted the N, the E to be, you know, something different. That actually doesn't match very well. Let me try. You know, some kind of idea there. I'm doing this within a couple seconds. With the real one, you would take a lot more time in it. But just to kind of give you some creative examples of just using text, not using any shapes yet. Even though this is shapes, it's not incorporating any shapes yet. Now, if you did want to use text and shapes, what you could do is, I'll just type this out again, new river, and make it a bit larger. And you could outline everything as well, like the past example, but for this one I'm going to focus on the shapes really quick. Couple options for when you're doing shapes. You can click and hold on these shape tools, say ellipse tool. One effective thing, I'm just going to hold shift so it maintains this perfect circles here. This is if you're going for a cloud theme as an example, but you can use any of the shapes and combine them. But right now these are all just a bunch of different shapes, right? What you can do is go to the Pathfinder palette, if you go to Window Pathfinder, and all these do different things. Sometimes it'll subtract the one that's on top from the text, or from the shape. Sometimes you can combine them. So this top one in the top left, Unite, if I click it, now it's actually one shape. It was many shapes put together, and now it's one. And you could, you know, put that behind it or whatnot. Okay, so that's the Pathfinder palette. Go ahead and experiment with that. You know, if you had a star, and then another star, and you have one on top of the other, and you selected both, and let's say, really depends on what you're trying to do. Exclude, we'll exclude the one there on the top. So now we have actually, this is actually the fill part, and this is actually empty and transparent in the middle. Okay, so all those do different kind of things, and it's pretty neat to check out and see what the Pathfinder palette can do with the different options there. Besides the Pathfinder palette, you can also use, even if you're just doing the text one, type on a path. So this doesn't have a shape after you're done with it, but what you can do with this is if you click and drag, say with the ellipse tool, and then click and hold onto the type tool and go to type on a path tool, and then click along the path there, and it gets rid of the shape. And you can change font, of course, and if you use the direct selection tool, you can actually move this around. Whoops. You can move it around to see if you want to move it a little bit over. And you can also click this little line here, and you can bring it on the inside or all the way down to the outside. So if you kind of bring it into the middle, it'll do that too. So just have to kind of experiment with it and get used to it. The way you can control where the text is with there. And then you could use that as just a logo, but maybe add a little bit to it. You could even outline it after you've done that. So now it's an outline. The only thing is it has a shape here when you outline it. Okay. So you may not want to outline it because you may want to be able to still edit the text as well if you do use type on a path. And besides all those, of course, you can use the pen tool in a logo as well. So if I type in, let's say, New River again, and of course, font choice is going to be relevant when you're doing a logo to match the theme, but I don't want to do anything too strange here. I'll just do Bookman old style. And as I bring this out here, and you can, of course, outline it if you want, or want some kind of element here in the middle. If you wanted to add, let's say, even like a river, you could click and let go, and click and let go. And then you can click on the end there, the handle, to reset the angle, and then click it again. Oops. And make sure you have window preview. I'm not sure why I went to outline, but maybe I hit Control Y. And I'll change the color here. Put it behind it. Actually make it a little bit larger here. And you can experiment with different shapes and text and just see what you can come up with. As far as the shapes, you want something that's simple and that kind of matches and flows with the overall theme of the design. Okay. So if you look at some famous examples, FedEx has the negative space where you see the arrow. If you can look at a lot of different new media companies, and very large companies like Coca-Cola, for example, have recognizable fonts, and just see how their font selection contributes to the overall theme of the logo and the branding. Because when you're doing identity design, you want to think about how the shapes and the text all work together. So for this one, let me just do one more technique, and then we'll actually place it onto a Photoshop file to show you what I mean as far as formatting it. So you could use it online on a website. I'll just use a star here and just a regular star, holding shift to maintain that correct proportion. I'm going to make it slightly blue there. Now if I alt click and drag it, it will duplicate it. And actually, instead of that, you could go to Object, Transform, Transform Each. And if you wanted a copy of it, but you wanted it exactly, say, 80% width and height of it, and you could move it over as well, but for this one I'm just going to make a copy, so I'll just hit copy, and that copies one right on top of it. That's another exactly 80%. So I have those two, and I'll hit this fourth option there, and that removes the inside of it, and I'll put this behind it. And that's a little large, so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. So let's say that's our logo for this. I just made it really quick in a couple seconds. On the real project, you're going to take a lot longer, more than hours, probably days, and maybe even sometimes weeks, depending on the client. But I'm just showing you some specific Illustrator techniques that you may use. So I'll just save this one as New River Logo. And in Photoshop, what you can do is go to File, Place, and choose New River Logo, and click OK. And it has it here, and go ahead and place it. And you can see how it will look on a website. If it's not just on blank space, white space, it'll be on top of an actual photo. You can kind of get an idea, once it's rasterized in a pixel-based format, how it will look. Okay. So at 100%, it shouldn't be pixelated or anything like that. Back in Illustrator, again, if you go to File, save it as an AI file. Other formats, I mean PDF, you'll often print it out as a PDF sometimes, but I would suggest just saving it as the default Adobe Illustrator file. You could also do Illustrator EPS that are, sometimes you can open those in other programs too, but I would just say the AI file, the default is the best, and you can just save in there. You could also, if you select it, do Control-C, or on the Mac, Command-C. And if you really wanted to, you could paste it onto a Photoshop file, and it might do something similar. So for example, paste. If you paste as a smart object, as you change it here in the original photo, it will change it in the original file, Illustrator file, it will change it here wherever you pasted it. I would just say pixels unless you plan on making it larger, but I'll just place it as pixels here. Same idea, and you can click and drag the edge there and hold shift and press enter to apply changes. You can also, once you placed it or pasted it onto something, just imagine if this was, say, a streaming video site, and you, like on Hulu, and your network logo was in the corner. It's not going to probably be at full opacity. You would change the opacity. So to preview that, go over here to the layers palette and just change opacity of that layer, a pasted layer there, and bring it down to say 50%, and then you can kind of see what it would look like. You can duplicate that layer and make one of them 100%, make one of them 50%, and it kind of gives you a preview of what your logo looks like on a photo, on a website, and then what your logo will look semi-transparent, you know, if it was on either a photo as a watermark or on a video as well. So if you're working for USA Network and you created the USA logo, how would it look in the little small right-hand corner on top of a show? Okay, so those are some basic techniques that you might want to consider when you're creating a logo in Adobe Illustrator, which is really the industry standard vector art software. Thank you.